I feel like a lot of what's going on in the franchise lately is getting old. Hello everyone, today we'll be looking to see if Transformers has become over-reliant on G1, designs being very similar, and stories and characters being too alike in the past few years, and on the whole, possibly becoming stagnant and stale. This is something that I have noticed for a while now, as have many other fans in the Transformers fan community. While G1 and G1 based stuff has always been a part of the brand, it seems to be oversaturated for the past few years, and creativity in the franchise as a whole, especially in designs, isn't what it once was. We'll look at 4 things here for this discussion: designs, toys, story and characters, TV and movies, and the future. First up, and this is kind of the big one for me, is the designs. For the longest time in Transformers, characters would have wildly varying designs with only a handful of characters truly retaining certain features. Optimus Prime is one of the few with design consistencies, and a great example to use here. Here is a look at his designs through the 2000s. Robots in Disguise, Armada, Energon, Cybertron, 2007 movie, and animated. All of these were from the 2000s, and none really look alike, while also keeping the basics of what people expect from an Optimus Prime design. Compare this with the designs from the 2010s and, so far, the 2020s. The War for Cybertron video game, Prime, the Fall of Cybertron video game, Prime Beast Hunters, Age of Extinction / The Last Night, Robots in Disguise 2015, the Machinima Prime Wars trilogy, Cyberverse, Evergreen, Bumblebee movie, and the Netflix War for Cybertron trilogy. While there are certainly unique and different designs, the Age of Extinction / The Last Night, Night Prime probably being the best example of that, a good chunk, especially in the last half of the decade, began to skew towards looking G1, and that seems to be the trend for a lot of characters in general. Megatron is another fantastic example. For the longest time, he never had a truly consistent design, alternate form, or even colors, and this was all up until about the time of the Michael Bay movies and Transformers Animated. He varied wildly, usually only the vague head shape, but sometimes not even that, a big cannon, and sometimes colors being the carryovers. G1, Original Beast Wars, Transmetal, Transmetal 2, Beast Machines, Robots in Disguise 2001, Armada, Energon, Cybertron, the 2007 movie, Revenge of the Fallen, animated. Once we get to animated, this is the biggest homage to the G1 design outside of the comics or something like the Classics figure. From there, outside of a few designs here and there, things start taking a hard turn towards resembling the G1 design. War for Cybertron video game, Prime, Dark of the Moon, Fall of Cybertron video game, Predacons Rising, Machinima Prime Wars trilogy, The Last Night, Cyberverse, Evergreen, and the Netflix Siege War for Cybertron trilogy. Even the movie characters started looking more G1 by The Last Night, and that series is known for its design departures. Megatron used to look pretty different depending on the continuity with a wide variety of alternate forms, but nowadays he's just kind of the same and it's really gotten boring. After the huge success of the live action films, the franchise as a whole began skewing towards keeping things more recognizable than before, which is completely fine. But in my opinion, a lot of creativity is gone since stuff more and more is just G1 with some differences here and there now. You definitely want some character recognition, but for me personally, I miss how weird and different versions of characters could look. It's very cool to have a wide array of designs and how they represent a specific iteration of a character. For a lot of the legacy characters, this is being lost in favor of more generic designs. This also bleeds into the toy side of things, since the figures are based on these designs, obviously. Starting in 2006, the Classics line reimagined G1 characters and designs with a modern influence. This led into Universe 2.0 and the first generation line, which both kept this up and had versions of characters from other iterations, but not usually in high numbers compared to the G1 based stuff. Some were better at this than others, but on the whole, the figures were pretty good. Generations in 2013 and 2014 used a lot of the IDW designs as a base and sprinkled in characters based on other continuities like Beast Wars, Waspinator, and Rhinox, and Armada Starscream. 2015 is where it started to hit hard G1 with the Prime Wars trilogy and Combiner Wars. Combiner Wars still took some inspiration from IDW, even coming with IDW comics, but many were still intent to be new G1 and done in that style. Titans Return did this as well, some IDW was sprinkled in, everyone was a headmaster unfortunately, and it still leaned into heavy G1, with Power Up the Primes following suit. Many characters that hadn't had a figure in a long time got one, and these lines certainly feature some stylization, but were intended to be G1 all the same. Many fans even refer to some of these figures as just the G1 toys, but with articulation. Of course, during this time, we had lines for the movies and any of the cartoons that were out at the same time. Then comes the War for Cybertron trilogy, which was not only leaning into G1, but G1 animation accuracy, same as the ongoing Masterpiece line had done a few years back and stuck to, for the most part, to this day. From 2018 through 2022, we had Siege, Earthrise, and Kingdom, along with Generation Selects, all being G1. Although Kingdom introduced Beast Wars, that is also technically G1 still. Earthrise especially was egregious of just redoing the same characters done in Siege, but with Earth modes. Understandably, that was kind of the point since Siege had these Cybertronian modes, but most of those were just kind of futuristic Earth modes than Cybertronian anyway, and had a great resemblance to the G1 character. Two of the biggest offenders are Studio Series 86 and the recently announced Legacy line. Studio Series 86 began in 2021 after being leaked in 2020 and was done in celebration of the 35th anniversary of the 1986 animated film, and was seemingly done to both help pad out the line since Studio Series had already done a great job covering the first three Bay films and the main Bumblebee cast, and put these G1 figures somewhere since slots in the War for Cybertron trilogy were already filled. But G1 was shoved into the line despite it originally being for live action stuff, but they changed it to being any theatrically released film. Okay, fair enough, but why did the live action stuff need to be brushed aside in its own line? Like Age of Extinction Grimlock came out in the first wave of Studio Series in 2018 with nothing in the 4 years since, but yet in a little over a year, the G1 Dinobots have had two released with another one announced. This was covered in my What Happened to Studio Series video, so check that out for more on that. Legacy just helps solidify that there is too much of a reliance on G1, as a line called Legacy, which would imply having characters from many different versions, has mostly G1 so far. The two Prime-based figures are nothing more than G1-ified versions of those designs, with Bulkhead especially standing as having almost nothing to him that screams Prime Bulkhead other than the head design. We'll see where Legacy goes beyond the first wave, but the only Legacy it seems concerned with is more G1. Now let's look at things within the story and plot on newer Transformers media. Lately things have been very similar in that the Transformers homeworld of Cybertron is dying, the Allspark is sent into space, usually by Optimus Prime, and the Autobots have to find it before the Decepticons can. This was first introduced in 2007 with the first live action film, with expansion by the IDW prequel comic. Since then we've had a similar Allspark used in animated, and the movie background being used almost exactly in the Aligned continuity, the Cyberverse continuity, and in the War for Cybertron continuity. Cyberverse and War for Cybertron especially share a good bit in common, even having the same design for the Allspark. While some series have evolved past this and have done some different things with the story, it is being rehashed a little too often at this point. In the past we had Beast Wars, which offered a new spin on the original story with a new design aesthetic. Robots in Disguise did a lot of things new and is genuinely different, but a great take, and the Unicron trilogy all had something different driving the story in each installment. Even Animated at least did something a bit different with the Allspark, and as a whole had a wide variety of new takes on characters and the story itself. Story beats are bound to be repeated, but this particular setup and series of events has definitely shown up a lot lately. Transformers is in need of some brand new and fresh ideas, and possibly even a new cast of characters a la Beast Wars, since we've all been seeing a similar cast of characters for around a decade now, if not a bit longer. This is in contrast to years before where you would have some mainstays like Optimus Prime, Megatron, Starscream, but they were surrounded by characters that either weren't used all that often or were completely new. Not to mention, a lot of the cast that you see tends to rely on G1 Season 1 and 2 characters, with some from the 1986 movie like Hot Rod and Ultra Magnus thrown in too. Last is the TV and movies in general. All of the television series for Transformers since Prime ended in 2013 have gotten a mostly lukewarm reception, with Cyberverse seemingly getting the most praise of the bunch. Robots in Disguise 2015, while doing something decently new with both characters and story, was lackluster in execution, aimed at a much younger audience, and was disappointing as a follow-up to Transformers Prime. The Machinima Prime Wars trilogy, consisting of the Combiner Wars, Titans Return, and Power of the Prime shows, also based on the toy line trilogy of the same name, is almost universally disliked, with just about the only praise being to its portrayal of Megatron. It had potential and tried to mix things up from the usual stuff, but failed on many levels. Cyberverse, while certainly aimed at a younger audience, seems to be received very well by fans. It did well with doing things new with characters, concepts, and stories, and, in my opinion, is worth a watch, especially when you get into the second season onward. The last of the recent shows is the Netflix War for Cybertron trilogy, based on the War for Cybertron toy line. It seems to have been received better than the Machinima trilogy, but as a whole is still regarded as pretty weak, especially where the voice acting and directing is concerned. Personally, I think they're a bit overhated, but I definitely understand the complaints. Transformers has had it rough in the TV category for a while now, with most fans hoping for something to rival shows like Beast Wars, Animated, and Prime again. I'll mention the last two live-action films since they're most relevant here. The Last Night, The Last of the Bayverse, came out in 2017 and was panned by most critics and fans and was a financial disappointment. I have things that I enjoy about the film, but on the whole, it's not good. The Bumblebee movie, released in 2018, was originally conceived as a prequel, and still is depending on who you ask, but once The Last Night came out and had the reception that it did, they removed most elements of it being a prequel, although things like a young Agent Simmons, Sector 7 and the Hoover Dam, the lack of Megatron in the opening scene, and Bumblebee assuming his old Chimera form are still left in. Many fans liked this movie, with some considering it the best Transformers film, and it was very well received by critics. I love the movie, but I do feel that it plays everything a bit too safe, or maybe more so rather bland for my liking. It is still a solid movie though, and highly recommended. Now, after looking at all this stuff, why has Transformers gotten this way? It seems hard to say for sure, but there are some factors that are likely key. One being the critical and financial disappointment of The Last Night, the other being that the aligned continuity didn't go how Hasbro originally intended. Plus, like with most franchises right now, there is a major nostalgia wave for the original stuff, and G1 seems to be having its moment in the sun. Now, I'm sure we'll get out of this apparent rut, but it has been going on for a while now. That doesn't mean that everything has been bad though, far from it. The figures, for an overwhelming majority of them across all lines, have been fantastic. Almost all of them boast amazing accuracy to the source material they are based on, and have great articulation. Scale, while never the most consistent thing in the franchise, has been worked in the main line in a good way with Studio Series and the War for Cybertron trilogy. The engineering has been great and some of the best seen in the history of the brand. Even if G1 seems to be taking over everything, a lot of the G1 fans are getting what they want in regard to mostly animation accurate figures in both the War for Cybertron trilogy and the Masterpiece toy line. While I'm not a fan of how much hard G1 has been going on in recent years, I am very happy for the fans who have been wanting that, and I've enjoyed a lot of what we have gotten from the trilogy and the Masterpiece lines. The Bayverse fans have been doing pretty well too, even if Studio Series has fallen short for the past year or so, and fans of the Bumblebee movie designs are getting some great figures of those as well. Even Cyberverse has been well received from what I have heard, although I have nothing from the line myself. Masterpiece, while more QC issues like fragile parts and paint chips have popped up thanks to increased complexity, is well regarded and has produced some of the best Transformers figures ever in the last few years, MP36 especially being a highlight for me. I truly think we need something big, something new for the franchise. Something like Beast Wars, Armada, or even the first few movies, which are all regarded as being major shifts in the brand that help to revitalize it, or even save it. Give a new cast of characters, ideas, designs, and aesthetic. Hell, the aesthetic doesn't necessarily need to be completely new if we can get new characters from the usual group and some new ideas. I obviously don't want them to just abandon everything that's come before, but something truly fresh and new would be fantastic fantastic, and that's something that I have commonly seen said by members of the fandom. And you know, at the end of it all, I just wish we could have the variety of the 2000s back. Yes, there were a lot of reboots, but that is simply how Transformers survived and kept itself relevant and fresh. The different and unique designs and styles, the different takes and interpretations of characters, new stories, concepts and ideas, etc. It was great to have such a wide variety. Or how about on the toy shelves? There was a time where you could find movie figures, the current cartoon, and the classics / universe / generation toy line on shelves at the same time, and they were truly varied. There truly was something for everyone. Whereas currently it seems like if you don't like G1, oh well, with it having 3 whole lines in the trilogy to itself after having a trilogy mostly to itself just before and then shoving its way into studio series, G1ifying non-G1 characters in Legacy and making up most masterpiece releases. I love a lot of what they've been doing and I own a lot of it, but it is a bit much. But maybe this will be the swan song at G1, at least for a while anyways, and if this is the last big hoorah, then I think I'll be okay with it at the end of the day. It just seems to be hogging most of the spotlight these days. Which leads me to another point, that we need more stuff from versions past. Where was anything for RID during its 20th anniversary last year? Will Armada get anything beyond a rumored Starscream in Legacy, which based on what we've seen could just be G1ified? Where is that goddamn Armada Optimus Prime prototype shown years ago? Why hasn't Animated gotten literally anything? Or even Beast Machines? I am a fan of most series and would love to see these get touched upon sometime, since some characters from these are in desperate need of updates, and it would just be nice to see these series come back, even if briefly. Third Party is giving us some great figures of Armada characters though, so there's that at least. As a whole, I do think Transformers has gotten at least a little stale and stagnant in the past few years. Designs are less varied, usually only set in 1 or 2 series and aesthetics, stories and characters are so similar, etc. I love the franchise and what it has the potential to be, and I'm not super unhappy with its current state if that helps. Plus, I cannot stress enough that I don't hate G1 or anything like that, and it isn't the sole problem here. I feel like it will be a little odd for any Transformers fan to outright hate G1. I just think it has been too prominently in the spotlight to the point of it becoming tiresome, especially when old series are left in the dust and nothing truly new in sight. Perhaps soon we'll get a truly new chapter for our robots in disguise and get to see more love given to the neglected parts of the past. In the meantime, I'll be enjoying what we have and appreciating it for what it is, and staying excited for news of the future, but still hoping for more. As always, I want to give a big thanks to everyone for watching and listening. If you like this, please leave it a like, and let me know your thoughts down below. Do you think Transformers is getting stagnant and stale? Why? Why not? And as always, if you like what I do, please check out more of my stuff, and of course, maybe even subscribe. Have a good one, everybody.